Hey folks, welcome back to Challenged. I'm back in the shop again working on my 68 GMC pickup project, and it probably looks a lot different than the last time you saw it. In a little over a month, I'm going to be attending the C10 Nationals down in Texas, May 10th and 11th, and I've got to make this into a running and driving truck. Yeah, 34 days to complete it and drive it there. The last time I left you with this truck, I'd done all of the brakes. It's good now. I've converted to power brakes. That's going to be incredibly helpful. I swapped out that 250 inline six because it was just bad and it wasn't worth rebuilding, and I put a small block Chevy 350 in it. One that I had built very budget oriented. And then I took it for a test drive and I noticed that my speedometer wasn't working. And when I got back, there was a little pool of oil underneath that transmission, so she was leaking. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to replace that front seal and then do the drive gear in that transmission. Well, to my surprise, to do that drive gear in that transmission meant that I had to split the case completely apart. And that basically took me down a rabbit hole of just rebuilding that entire transmission. Whenever I was driving it, it was grinding a bit, and I found inside of it, this is one of the synchros that's in it, and there is a lot of wear on it. Not only that, but the synchro keepers that were inside of it, actually a couple of them were just completely missing. There's a retaining ring and it was just gone and exploded. So there were a lot of little pieces and parts in the bottom of that transmission, but the gears themselves were all in really good shape. So a simple rebuild was all it took. So I stabbed that back in, but then I noticed that the rear main seal in this engine was leaking, and I don't really want to mark everywhere that I go. And of course it was brand spanking new because I had rebuilt that engine. And when I say rebuilt it, I just basically new seals, rings, bearings, you know, that sort of stuff. I didn't do any machine work on it, and that bit me in the butt. So I got the truck up in the air, I pulled the pan down, pulled that main cap on that rear main seal, and the seal looked perfect and was installed correctly. However, that crankshaft that I put that seal in, must not have looked at it close enough because it had two little grooves in it where that seal was to ride, and that rough surface caused me to have an oil leak. Well, it was around the same time that I decided I need to go ahead and address the rockers in this. They were completely bad, and I needed to cut those out. So I decided, let's pull this front clip off of this truck so I can do everything right. So as I cut out all of the cancer, that included the outer rockers, the inner rockers, part of this floor pan right here, had to do some A-pillar patches and a little bit of patching on that kick panel on the inside. And of course, this was on both sides. Well, if you've ever done this work, you basically have to take off this front clip because you cannot get to the front of those rockers to do everything that you need to do with the fenders on. Or I guess you could just take the fenders off, but it's a lot easier just to take that front clip off. You have to take everything out of the inside of it. You got to take the doors off, and so it's a very involved process. And if you're going this far, it's hard not to just go all the way with everything that you need to do. So with the front clip off of this truck, I decided, you know what, let's go ahead, pull that 350 back out. I already know that I need to do a repair on it. And why don't I just do it right, like I should have done the first time? This was supposed to be a budget truck, and that is exactly how I built that engine. Really, it was just a bunch of pieces that I had laying around, and I wanted to see if I could make the whole thing work. And it did work, it did run, but it had some issues. Let me show you. Not only did we need to address this crankshaft, but the heads that I had put on there, well, they were leaking into the combustion chambers pretty bad. So these heads just turned out to be junk. And again, if you're going this far into the whole thing, you might as well do it right. So since those were leaking into the cylinders, they were actually putting rust pits in the cylinder walls. It was definitely time to bore out this engine. And believe it or not, I have my own boring bar. So I set it up, I bored these over, everything cleaned up. Normally would be 30 thousandths. This one took a little more, so I had to go 40 thousandths on it. After it was bored, I used a torque plate and a hone that I have, a Lyle hone. And I was able to get those cylinders just perfectly true, right to the right size again with that torque plate. These are the stock rods and pistons, and of course if I'm boring over, I have to replace these pistons with 40 over pistons. And of course that crankshaft, it needed to be reground. However, I found out that you could buy a crankshaft through Summit, just a stock type cast crankshaft, and it was actually cheaper just to buy it new than it was to have this one reground. As much as I like to reuse old parts, I got to look at the checkbook as well. So I got myself a new cast crank. I got myself a set of Summit, actually they're forged rods, and then some KB Claimer 40 over pistons. I sent that all over to the machine shop to be balanced, and it came back just perfectly. I had another set of heads that were sitting on my shelf way over there, and they were from a 400 engine that I'm going to be rebuilding at some point. This is that. However, I'm not going to use those 400 heads on that 400. I have a set of AFR heads for that. So those heads were in really good shape. I just gave them a valve job, reground the valves. I put new seals in it, new valve springs to handle a little increased lift. So this is where we are today. I've got it on my run stand. I am getting ready to run this in. However, I think I may end up trying to paint this before I do that. But the engine's together, and pretty soon it's going to be running and you're going to see it on this channel. Since everything was torn apart, it's a good time to look at that steering. And as I was doing that, I was checking it for tightness, basically. And I have never seen one that looked that bad. There was so much slop in this. So I replaced the outer and the inner, as well as the adjusting sleeve for those tie rods, a new idler arm, a brand new pitman arm down here. And of course, this truck was manual steering, and I am converting it over to power steering. So I got this, a used one, out of just a power steering truck of this same year. Had to change the rag joint to one for a power steering, and then of course put the correct pitman arm in as well. So those three things have to be changed if you're going to change this to power steering, but it definitely can be done. Your center link you can use, as well as your entire steering column. So I have 34 days from now to make this a running and driving truck, and I'd like to do it to where I can get it done about a week early so I can use it as my daily driver and make sure that nothing is wrong with it. And if it's not obvious, whoa, do we have a lot of work to do. So I'm going to show this on the channel and let you guys come on this journey with me to see if we can actually get this done. I'm sure going to try. My cousin Chad's going to try to be here as much as he can, but that's honestly maybe once a week if I'm lucky. So I got to spend every waking moment doing this, and that's what I've been trying to do. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know down in the comments, do you really think I can get this thing in shape by that deadline in 34 days? I have my own doubts, but I'm sure going to give it a try. And if any of you are going to be in the Texas area May 10th and 11th, come down to C10 Nationals, come see me. I will definitely be there. Stay challenged, my friends.